Good afternoon or good evening, depending where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Monday, May the 23rd, 2022. Happy Victoria Day to all my fellow Canadians listening. But we're going to start off with something, not so happy. Monkeypox, i.e., AIDS 2.0. Or we're all going to die. This is from the London Sun. Monkeypox cases in Spain and Italy have been traced to an island festival attended by 80,000 revelers. Yes, that's one way to put them. Authorities are trying to halt an outbreak that has exploded across Europe and beyond, with 92 cases now confirmed and dozens more suspected. There are many pictures in this London Sun story, and you get a pretty good idea of the kind of revelers they had on Gran Canaria. Monstrous perverts. And let's scroll down. There's some pictures of people afflicted with monkeypox. Not nice to look at. Oh, the Canaria Pride Festival. Okay, you're finally going to mention it. Are you? Finally going to mention it. Experts have warned that although monkeypox is not a sexually transmitted disease, it could be passed on through skin-to-skin contact during sex. Many known patients are gay men who were tested after going to STI clinics, the World Health Organization said. Health chiefs warned gay and bisexual men to be on the lookout for new unexplained rashes. Yes, new unexplained rashes, not just unexplained rashes. Because, there are so very many of them. And let's go to the Daily Mail's coverage of this Pride Festival. Okay, they lead off with Pride in Gran Canaria, which was attended by 80,000 people, is linked to Spanish monkeypox outbreak, as well as 2 cases in Italy, while European total reaches 100. And they mention Pride again in the first paragraph. Oh, and Pride in the second. This festival, Mas Palamas Pride, attracted visitors from across the continent, apparently from Canada too, judging by the infection figures. It was attended by people who have tested positive for the monkeypox virus afterwards, with public health services from the Canary Islands now investigating any links between the cases and the alphabet people celebrations. Yes, once again, there is no conclusive evidence that the latest outbreak is sexually transmitted, rather than simply being passed between people who are in close proximity to each other. Okay. As such, gay men are not believed to be more likely to contract the disease, however, potentially more likely to have been exposed to it due to the known incidences at events or locations that attracted large amounts of people from across the LGBT community. Okay. Well, the last time I checked, sexual intercourse involves plenty of skin-on-skin contact. So if this was not a gay-related, sexually transmitted disease, then one wouldn't see very many heterosexuals with it. Oh, and I wonder if they... Oh, yes, the development came as that after it emerged, Spanish authorities were also investigating confirmed cases of monkeypox that have been linked to a sauna, which in Spain is used to describe establishments popular with gay men looking for sex rather than just a bathhouse. Okay, that's good to know. Oh, gay and bisexual men, the story mentions. And of course, the last word on this was from Liz Lemon on 30 Rock. There's no such thing as bisexual. That's just something invented in the 90s so they could sell more hair products. And this is leading on a Drudge from Spencer Kimball of CNBC. CDC officials sound alarm for gay and bisexual men as monkeypox spreads in a community. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Monday alerted gay and bisexual men that monkeypox appears to be spreading in the community globally, warning people to take precautions if they have been in close contact with someone who may have the virus, and to be on the lookout or symptoms? Well, the symptoms are hard to miss. Dr. John Brooks, a CDC official, emphasized that anyone can contract monkeypox through close personal contact, regardless of sexual orientation. However, Brooks said many of the people affected globally so far are men who identify as gay or bisexual. You could identify as either of those things, and if you're not having sexual contact, then I guess you don't have to worry. Although they may have a greater chance of exposure to monkeypox right now, that doesn't mean the risk is limited only to the gay and bisexual community, he cautioned. Does this remind anyone of AIDS? Certainly reminds me of AIDS. Very much so, in fact. And let's go to see what Eugippius has to say. Here's a preprint with what we know about the monkeypox virus genome from a 4th of May a Portuguese sample. Quote, a first rapid phylogenetic analysis of the draft genome indicates that the 2022 virus belongs to the milder West African clade and is most closely related to viruses associated with the exportation of monkeypox virus from Nigeria to several countries in 2018 and 2019, namely the United Kingdom, Israel, and Singapore. Eugippius comments, preliminary hypothesis has to be that this virus was introduced years ago, perhaps just before the corona pandemic, and has been circulating at low levels unnoticed until now. Yes, I know about the 2021 NTI tabletop exercise featuring a modified monkeypox pathogen, but here are two things that make the current moment unlike Event 201. The pathogen at the center of the exercise is some modified bioterror weapon, as is usual for these tabletop simulations. Event 201 was odd because, exceptionally, it featured a naturally occurring pathogen precisely on the eve of a pandemic caused by a virus that was almost certainly leaked from a lab. Smallpox outbreaks are classic pathogens for these tabletop exercises, as the important pandemic botherers all owe something to the late 20th century campaign to eradicate smallpox. The related monkeypox virus is thus an understandable pathogen. Event 201, on a naturally occurring coronavirus, was in the world of pandemic simulations, rather more of an exception. And let's go to Alex Berenson, who asks, is it monkeypox or crystal pox? Oh dear. Once again, honesty is going to prove tough for the public health authorities. Berenson begins, are you a gay man? Specifically, are you a gay man who likes sex with lots of other gay men? Maybe in a bathhouse, maybe names optional, maybe with a meth bump on the side? No, are you sure? It's cool if you are, no judgments. They're called glory holes for a reason, people. Still no? Okay, don't worry about the monkeypox thing then. You can almost feel the public health authorities squirming right now. On the other hand, they've almost got another epidemic on the go, the perfect way to distract the shiny-haired robots in the media from the complete failure of the mRNA vaccines. On the other, the monkeypox epidemic, stop me if you've heard this before, very much appears to be centered around the sexual practices of gay men and bisexual men, also known as gay men who want to pretend they're straight. In this, monkeypox joins not just HIV, but syphilis, gonorrhea, and a bunch of other nasties. The state of California figures demonstrate that, here we go, compared to other groups, gay and bisexual men have early syphilis rates that are 248 times higher than other males and 554 times higher than females. But once again, they're virtually normal, just like us. Reminder that the most authoritative survey of the sexual habits of Americans was done at the University of Chicago, which involved, extensive interviews, which discovered that the average number of sexual partners that a heterosexual man has in his lifetime is 6. The average number of sexual partners a homosexual American man has in his lifetime is 125. Yeah, virtually normal indeed. Let's go to the chat. Hello to respectable commenting name. Says, good evening, chat and KMG. Will we shut down the bathhouses in a matter of global homophobia, or will our new anxiety-ridden populace melt down even harder than they already have? Hello to Oscar Toe, to Dan, Mercurius Olicus, Anrun, Oscar Toe, who says, Victoria Day, I had no idea. Hope you Canadians are having a great one. Oscar Toe says, finally watched Waterloo. What an extravagant film. Thoroughly enjoyed. This was the film the box office lack of success or failure of resulted in Stanley Kubrick scrapping his movie about Napoleon Bonaparte, which was surely the most extensively researched movie in history. Oscar Toe says, Christopher Plummer, another Canadian, was a good Wellington, and you were right about the hammy Rod Steiger as Napoleon. Hello to Gamion and Tom Anderson. Head McNeck. And let's see. Tarot Destroyer says it could be Stevens-Johnson syndrome. It's a sort of the skin and mucous membranes. It is usually a reaction to medication that starts with flu-like symptoms, followed by a painful rash and blisters. Hello to Rudy Giuliani. Well, obviously not the real one. Mercurius Olicus says, strange they don't mention ways to avoid bad monkey disease. Yes, it is strange, isn't it? Hello to David Wright, who says, hazmat up signs to come. Gay and bisexual phrases, the new Judeo-Christian, says Rudy Giuliani. Good one. Good one. Yo Mama says 40 years later, and they would still rather to die than give up anonymous buggery. This so-called festival lasted for 10 days. 10 days. I guess there was a lot of chemsex going on. The real test is whether we have Music Monday on a Monday, not this week. Things are afoot. I'll just tell you that. Who else do we have here? Hello to Che Blutarski, who says all that was needed for humanity to survive was for no one to have carnal relations with a monkey. So obviously we are doomed. Rudy Giuliani says a disproportionate amount of the alphabet have a problem with kids. Strategically adaptive memeplex says, please don't rub our pathetic sex lives in our faces. Well, the book called, what's it called? Gay Ecology, by a homosexual physician. That's a fascinating book, I must say. And he said that the reaction to the University of Chicago results was fascinating, because when homosexuals were informed of the number 6 for heterosexual partners during lifetime, they said, no, that's not true. They're lying. And when heterosexual men were informed of the 125 number, they responded, no, that's not true. They're lying. Oscar Toe says, I also watched Mishima that Kevin recommended, and it was really good. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear it. Let's maybe assume this isn't the real Rudy, says Head McDeck. Yes, indeed. Mishima would be a good double feature with Percival, says Oscar Toe. Hello to Jonathan Ferguson. Monkeypox is COVID-2, but the mRNA jab causes... Oh, right. Okay. Kevin, do you know why Mishima always wrote at midnight? Not offhand. Maybe he wrote it after coming back from clubbing. David the Gnome says, someone once mentioned on a site, which I'm not going to mention here, the lack of any real historical books on the nature of the gays and power and intrigue and their behaviors, probably because it would be too unsavory for decent society. Well, Gay Ecology, the doctor's name is Gabriel Rotello. It is shocking, absolutely shocking. I won't go into details, but there is a sexual practice amongst homosexuals that is so fantastic, so obviously dangerous, so obviously insane that it was unknown of until the 1970s. Susanna Berlinski says, I suspect that all of the upcoming epidemics will exhibit all of the side effects of, yes, treatments. Let's say Larry Kramer, yes, the founder of ACT UP and the Gay Men's Health Crisis. He he had a book published, I think, by Random House, and it came out just before the AIDS panic, and it was called Faggots. Don't cancel me. That's what his novel is called. Okay, and I found it at a remainder table for $1.99 or whatever. And oh, Larry Kramer, yeah, he's a famous screenwriter or whatever. And I read the book, and before I read the book, I thought I had a cast iron stomach, but this was too much for me. Did Mishima Club? Asked Head McNeck. Indeed, he did. Okay. Susanna Berlinski quotes Mishima. It is a common failing of childhood to think that if one makes a hero out of a demon, the demon will be satisfied. That's from Confessions of a Mask. Poor KMG thought it was just a book about cigarettes, says respectable commenting name. Again, good one. Good one. So let's find out more about the sainted Dr. Fauci and what an absolutely bizarre fellow he is. I mean, and I'm looking at this from a public health viewpoint. There's a magazine called the Advocate, which is the leading gay men's magazine in America, I believe. And okay, again, here's the headline. Dr. Fauci visited gay bathhouses and bars to study HIV, to study them, not to wave his hands and say, what are you doing? Shut this down. And then going to the authorities and saying, do you have any idea what's going on in here? Shut this down. No, he did not do that. This is from May Rude, M-E-Y Rude. Okay, sounds made up, but Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, has revealed he spent time in gay bathhouses and bars during the height of the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. In an interview last week, Terry Gross for NPR's Fresh Air, Fauci talked about how a big part of his job has been studying HIV, and during the 80s that led him to visit bathhouses and gay bars in San Francisco and New York. Quote, this was the very, very early years of the outbreak. We were seeing these large numbers of mostly gay men who were formerly otherwise well. Oh, really? Were they? The connection between syphilis and AIDS, I'm not saying that it was a correlation was 100%, but it was very, very high. Okay, otherwise well, who were being devastated by this terrible, mysterious disease. And it was so concentrated in the gay community that I really wanted to get a feel for what was going on there that would lead to this explosion of a sexually transmitted disease. I went to the Castro district, I went down to Greenwich Village, and I went into bathhouses to essentially see what was going on. The epidemiologist in me went, oh my goodness, this is a perfect setup for an explosion of a sexually transmitted disease. And the same thing going to gay bars and seeing what was going on. And they gave me a great insight into the explosiveness of the outbreak of the sexually transmitted disease, unquote. He noted that then President Ronald Reagan and his religious right supporters made HIV and AIDS research a lot harder. Untrue. It was Margaret Heckler, who was secretary of HHS, who gave a press conference in 1984, was it? Announcing that HIV was the cause of AIDS. This is not normally how science works. It is typically not politicians who make pronouncements of this sort. But that was Reagan's Health and Human Services secretary, and that just opened the spigot for, I don't know, probably after cancer, the greatest amount of medical spending in human history. He doesn't think Reagan personally hated gay people. I believe because of a large part of his constituency was that way. What he did not do is he did not use the bully pulpit of the presidency to gain support and attention to what was going on right in front of everyone's eyes. How about, telling them to stop doing what they're doing? Gross asked how Fauci felt about AIDS activists targeting him in the 80s for not doing more to combat the epidemic. Fauci said he understood and that it changed him forever. I'll never forget that. He said of Larry Kramer's op-ed that called him a murderer, he wanted to gain my attention, and he certainly did gain my attention. And yes, AIDS 2.0. We were told at the beginning of AIDS that AIDS was everyone's disease. That was, in fact, a phrase that Dr. Fauci was fond of, despite the fact that it was originally called GRIDS, gay-related immune deficiency syndrome. We can't have gay in there because that might give people the idea that this is disproportionately disease of homosexual men, which of course it was. I'm trying to remember where I read this. It could have been Celia Farber. I'll get back to her in a minute. In the final issue of Harper's Magazine that Louis Lapham published, that she reported that, based on extensive interviews, there was not a single case in New York City of a woman getting AIDS from vaginal intercourse. Not a single case. 1, homosexual men. 2, IV drug use. 3, blood transfusions. And the blood transfusions were from whom? Now, I had thought, and this is still amazing to me, that the AIDS epidemic, which we were told threatened the entire world, no one was safe. If you have sex with someone, you are having sex with every other person that person has a sex with, which is preposterous a way of putting it, because if that were literally true, everyone in the world would have been HIV infected. But no, I thought that the gays were going to get it in the neck. Instead, it led to their triumph. Funny how that works, eh? So this is from Spin magazine from 2015. At the end of 1989, 2 years after we had started the highly controversial AIDS column in Spin, we published an article by Celia Farber called Sins of Omission about the truly bad and corrupt science surrounding promoting AZT as a treatment for the syndrome of diseases. AZT had been an abandoned cancer drug, discarded because of its fatal toxicity, resurrected in the cynical belief that AIDS patients were going to die anyway. So trying it out was sort of like playing with the house's money. Yes, it was abandoned as a cancer drug because it killed every single person who kept taking it, which is what happened when they started to give it to AIDS patients. It killed every single person who didn't stop taking. You know why? Because AZT is a DNA chain terminator. That is to say, it destroys your body's ability to create cells, which results in, guess what? Death. Agonizing death. Because the drug didn't require the usual massively expensive research and trial processes, having gone through that years earlier, it was insanely profitable for its maker, Burroughs Wellcome. It was a tragically perfect storm of windfall profits, something to pacify AIDS activists and the media, and a convenient boom to the patent holders for HIV testing. So this was the fastest approved drug in FDC, Food and Drug and FDA history. Because we have to do something. You have to do something. And it turns out that, yes, an absolute failure. It was rushed through. There was never a completed double-blind study on this, or last time I checked, on any other AIDS drug. You know why that is? Because the people on the placebo, information is exchanged. And so the people on the placebo want the drug as well. So people who are taking the drug give the drug, to people who are making entreaties. And a lot of these AIDS drugs have had very, very nasty side effects. And so people who are on the regime are sickened and, okay, fine, I'll stop. This is not how science is supposed to work. But that's how it worked with AIDS. Does AZT do anything? Yes, it does. But the evidence that it does something against HIV is really not there. Yes, in the case of AZT, the study became unblinded on all sides after just a few weeks for reasons which I've already explained. Brooke pointed out that since the drug is a form of chemotherapy, it should be only prescribed by doctors who have experience with chemotherapeutic drugs because of the most severe toxic effect of AZT, cell depletion of the bone marrow. Patients would need frequent blood transfusions. As it happened, AZT was rampantly prescribed as soon as it was released way beyond its purported parameters. The worst case scenario had come true. Doctors interviewed by the New York Times later in 1987 revealed that they were already giving AZT to healthy people who had tested positive for antibodies to HIV. And let's look at the sainted Dr. Fauci's role in this. August 17, 1989, newspapers across America banner headlined that AZT had been proven to be effective in HIV antibody positive, asymptomatic, and early ARC patients, even though one of the panel's main concerns was that the drug should only be used in a last case scenario for critically ill AIDS patients due to the drug's extreme toxicity. Dr. Anthony Fauci, head of the NIH, was now pushing to expand prescription. The FDA's traditional concern had been thrown to the wind. Already the drug had spread to 60 countries and an estimated 20,000 people. Not only had no new evidence allayed the initial concerns of the panel, but the follow-up data, as Dr. Brooke predicted, had fallen by the wayside. The beneficial effects of the drug had proven to be temporary. The toxicity, however, stayed the same. Burroughs Wellcome stock went through the roof when the announcement was made. At a price of $8,000 per patient per year, not including blood work and transfusions, AZT is the most expensive drug ever marketed. Burroughs Wellcome's gross profits for next year, well, that was 3 decades ago, estimated at $230 million. And let's check up on Dr. Fauci. The government has announced, this is August 17, 1989, that 1.4 million healthy HIV antibody positive Americans could benefit from taking AZT, even though they show no symptoms of disease. New studies have supposedly proven that AZT is effective in stopping the progression of AIDS in asymptomatic and early ARC cases. Dr. Fauci, the head of NIH, proudly announced that a trial has been going on for 2 years and had clearly shown that early intervention will keep AIDS at bay. Anybody who has antibodies to HIV and less than 500 T4 cells should start taking AZT at once, he said. That is approximately 650,000 people. 1.4 Americans are assumed HIV antibody positive, and eventually all of them may need to take AZT so they don't get sick, Fauci contended. The leading newspapers didn't seem to think it unusual. There was no existing copy of the study, but rather a breezy 2-page press release from the NIH. When Spin called the NIH asking for a copy of the study, we were told that it was still being written. Yes, it's terribly dishonest the way they portrayed these numbers, says Dr. Sonnabend. Why is that a surprise? Why is that a surprise? Fauci should have been disgraced and quite possibly imprisoned for his role in the AZT debacle, as well as in his role of terrifying tens of millions or more of Americans in saying that AIDS was everyone's disease. You people might be saying, why do I care so much about this? I'm not fond of homosexuals. I don't want them murdered by doctors and big pharma. That seems to go, too far. This is Steve Watson at Summit News, and what a shocker. The Wuhan Biolab, that was the center of controversy surrounding gain-of-function research on coronaviruses, appears to have been carrying out the same kind of research on monkeypox to make it more lethal to humans, according to a report citing the peer-reviewed journal Virologica Sinica, which published the lab's findings in February. The National Pulse reports the Wuhan Institute of Virology assembled a monkeypox virus genome, allowing the virus to be identified through PCR tests using a method researchers flagged for potentially creating a contagious pathogen. The study was first published in February 2022, just months before the latest international outbreak of monkeypox cases, which appear to have now reached the United States. Once again, this is my suggestion, that gain-of-function research be banned with no exceptions. And those who have been found, who are found after this ban to take part in this, are those who approved the funding, uh, shot by firing squad as soon as is humanly possible pour encourager les autres. And in somewhat related news, certainly alphabet people news, this is from the Washington Examiner. The auto insurance company State Farm is encouraging its agents in Florida to donate books promoting transgenderism to 5-year-olds to their local schools or public libraries, according to an email shared by a whistleblower. The email, obtained by the nonprofit organization Consumers Research and shared with the Washington Examiner, revealed that State Farm has partnered with the Gender Cool Project, which promotes issues of gender identity in children through various advocacy and public awareness programs, to donate a packet of 3 books to local schools and public libraries. The 3 books, a kid's book about being transgender, a kid's book about being non-binary, and a kid's book about being inclusive, contain various descriptions about gender and identity meant to disprove the notion that gender is the same as biological sex and establish that it is therefore changeable. No, notion is not the proper word in that paragraph. Truth is. The Gender Cool Project markets the 3-book bundle to children ages 5 or over, a fact noted in the whistleblower email. The project's goal is to increase representation of alphabet people books and support our communities in having challenging, important, and empowering conversations with children age 5 plus. Dated January 18th, the email was sent by Jose Soto, a corporate responsibility analyst for State Farm in Florida. And in addition to promoting the company's partnership with the Gender Cool Project, it sought to recruit 6 State Farm insurance agents in Florida to receive these books in March, then donate them to their community by the end of April. This is a fantastic way to give back, and an easy project that will help support the alphabet people community and to make the world around us better. Nationwide, approximately 550 State Farm agents and employees will have the opportunity to donate this 3-book bundle to their local teacher, community center, or library of their choice. Well, okay, groomers. And more on that word a little later. There are books that children are reading in school, including in elementary school, which are considered so disgusting that when selections or excerpts from these books are read at school board meetings, the people who attempt to bring this in record are shouted down. How dare you? This is too disgusting. Too disgusting for adults, but apparently not too disgusting for little children. This is from Bob Unruh at WorldNet Daily. Judge determines 2 controversial books obscene for children. The fight comes out of Virginia Beach, Virginia, where a circuit court judge has declared genderqueer and A Court of Mist and Fury obscene for unrestricted viewing by minors. The challenge had been brought by Virginia State Delegate Tim Anderson, who said the ruling is appropriate. It doesn't mean the books are banned, said Anderson. Yes, tell Stephen King that, please, somebody. In a report by broadcast outlet WJLA, it doesn't mean we're burning books or infringing on free speech. What it means is that there is extreme sexual graphic content in both of these books, not suitable for minors without the parent consent. He said the efforts now will turn to applying pressure on those who supply such material to children. It is Fairfax County mother Stacey Langdon who several times has read excerpts from Genderqueer in school board meetings to emphasize its offensive nature. She said of the decision, if a judge adjudicates it and rules the book to be obscene, then from my understanding, it would have to be removed here as it will be down in Virginia Beach schools. The report explained Fairfax County Public Schools had removed several challenged books like Genderqueer and Lawn Boy, but reinstated them. And okay, here's another book about schools. Another story about schools. This is from Melissa Klein and Bernadette Hogan at the New York Post. New York City school kids are learning their AOCs, a book intended for 10 and 11-year-olds, which glorifies a socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her far-left squad, knocks religion, and mocks Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, is being distributed to public school libraries, parents told the Post. The book What You Don't Know, A Story of Liberated Childhood, was written and illustrated by Brooklynite Anastasia Higginbotham and appears on a fifth grade independent reading list labeled Universal Mosaic. The Department of Education's new Mosaic curriculum is supposed to kick off next year. The picture book centers on a black child who talks about fitting in at school and church and a friend who's, quote, queer like me, unquote. The boy, named Demetrius, is shown in a church where he says churches can preach all they want about love. The only thing that I feel when I'm here is shame. The boy's spirit meets Jesus, who is apparently a Democrat, and tells him that everyone is invited to love and be loved. Everyone? Everyone? The distressed boy points to an unnamed white man, a McConnell lookalike, and says, "Even?" Jesus replies, "Yes." Higginbotham, in a reading the book posted to YouTube, confirmed that the unnamed white man is indeed McConnell and that they are at Catholic church. Yes, and it goes on to plug Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, and Ilhan Omar. It is really terrible. This is terrible art. I mean, just incompetent. Higginbotham wrote another controversial book called Not My Idea, about a child who connects to the opportunity and their responsibility to dismantle white supremacy. Another controversial book on the Mosaic list that has upset parents is Our Skin, which is geared towards those ages 2 to 5 and blames the idea of race and racism on white people. It's on the kindergarten reading list. There's not very many 2-year-olds that can read, and oh, yes, race and racism are concepts which are going to be well beyond children aged 2 to 5. I suppose it'd be easy enough to get them simply to hate white people. That would be fairly easy enough. Disney stock has collapsed in the last year, but never accused them of being insincere or cowardly. This is from Spencer Lindquist at Breitbart. Amid pushback from parents and Republican leaders, Disney has launched a Pride Collection initiative, which includes an Alphabet People Pride themed line of plush toys marketed to young children. Among the plush toys from Disney, which were made in conjunction with the Squishmallow Company, are various Disney characters such as Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, and Stitch, all of which feature a rainbow design. The back of the tag reads, "In celebration of Pride and the company's Pride Collection, the Walt Disney Company is giving funds as part of our ongoing commitment to organizations around the world that support alphabet people communities." The front of the tag notes that the plush toy is intended for children 0 plus. The release of the Pride-themed plush toys is only one facet of the company's campaign to push left-wing gender theory on children. As Breitbart reported, the multinational corporation has launched their Pride Collection, complete with a clothing line with the rainbow overlaid on the logo of Marvel, Star Wars, and Pixar. I thought that was just taken for granted. Isn't this rather painting the lily? Disney is donating the profits from the Pride Collection to a number of different alphabet people organizations around the world. Profits, eh? Okay, what to do about this? How about fighting back? The intellectual dark web said no. That would be rude. Besides, we might win if we did that. This is from Mary Harrington at Unheard. Having your female idea repeated to much greater effect by a male colleague in meetings is, for office-working women, such a familiar occurrence it's become a weary stereotype. So the sight of a man, campaigner Chris Rufo, denouncing gender ideology to another man on the Tucker Carlson show ruffled many gender-critical feminist feathers, not least when Carlson blamed feminists for pushing this ideology, asking, "Where are the men to stop this?" The response to this intervention has highlighted critical fissures in the potential coalition opposed to gender ideology, willingness to work across the political aisle, and willingness to operate outside classical liberal political conventions. And there's a tweet from Christopher Rufo embedded here. Quote, The gender ideology movement has secured millions in taxpayer fundings to promote puberty blockers, double mastectomies, prosthetic genitalia, and bizarre sexual fetishes to children. It has to stop, unquote. Campaigner Kara Dansky rebuked Rufo, pointing out that women have been at this for years, while taking the opportunity to promote her own book. In turn, Rufo's response was sharp. Quote, frankly, those of you who have been at this for years have done nothing but lose ground, unquote. And where's the lie? Cue outrage. Let's leave aside the fact that in the UK, at least, opposition to trans activism has been far from hopeless. But being told by men that we're doing it wrong hits a sore point for the many long-standing opponents of trans activism whose views are inflected by radical feminism. Very crudely, radical feminists object to trans ideology on the basis that gender is a hierarchy imposed on women as a class by men as a class in order to entrench male domination. As such, when you put it like that, it really sounds unbelievably stupid. As such, treating gender as more salient in political terms than biological sex is just viewed as a trendy new way of entrenching the same hierarchy and oppressing the same biological sex class, women, as ever. From this perspective, the galling sight of males popping up to criticize trans activism and seemingly receiving little blowback when women have faced years of job losses, social and professional ostracism, and even death threats for voicing gender-critical views looks like yet another data point for gender is a hierarchy. This is by no means the only possible framework for objecting to trans activism, though. Conservatives and Catholics, among others, also object on quite different grounds. Radical feminists are vocal, but are relatively few in number. What are the prospects, then, of building coalitions across these disparate ideologies? This thorny question has powered much of the internal politics within gender-critical activism in recent years. When Kelly J. Keane, aka Posey Parker, was hosted by the Right-Wing Heritage Foundation in 2019, debate among gender-critical feminists about the desirability of this alliance was, to put it mildly, intense. Well, a few years ago, what was it, 5 years ago, I interviewed a nice young woman identified as a feminist who was complaining about the takeover of what the feminist space, feminist club, or whatever, at the University of Victoria by troons. And it was a sad story, actually, that a particularly deranged troon who had been, partially castrated, I don't want to go into the details, basically terrorized the women there. Or a lot of women there, it seemed, oh no, these people are discriminated against, and why should we give them a hard time? Well, you campaigned for your women's spaces, for your safe spaces, and you were given them, and then a bunch of crazies decided to take them from you, and you surrendered to them. This woman, who was unwilling to give her name, and I understand, woman I interviewed, why she wouldn't give her name, how many of them were even willing to speak out, albeit pseudo-anonymously? Meanwhile, some more liberal objectors to trans ideology object to Rufo's mobilization of institutional power to fight back. You can't use the power of the state to win culture war battles, said writer Katie Herzog. Although in Texas and Florida, it looks a great deal as though conservatives are doing precisely that, to some considerable effect. Meanwhile, much of the effective gender-critical activism in the UK is focused on pushing back against precisely this capture of state power by trans activists. Rufo is explicit about sharing almost none of the RadFem's objectives and seeing their framework as more part of the problem than not. Quote, I don't believe trans-exclusive radical feminism can solve the problem of trans-inclusive radical feminism, unquote. While his desired outcome is not a TERF-approved gender curriculum in schools. It's a serious question then. Should critical political mass mean coalition between feminist Christians and the right? What would be the prospects of radical feminists joining? And in terms of approach, are American political liberals willing to abandon their faith in reason and political process and, like Rufo, instead try and recapture state power in their own favor? It's perhaps the oldest question in practical politics. How badly do you want to win? When what's at stake is whether it's legal and morally acceptable to sterilize children in the name of inner identity. It's a question worth asking. Yes, when you put it that way, it very much is a question worth asking. Are you willing to have your children corrupted by schools in secret, hmm? Mutilated psychically and often physically for life? Are you willing to put up with that? Well, I guess then you'll put up with anything. Now, it seems that there's a case of the SADs going around amongst the alphabet people. This is from Ellen McCarthy at the Washington Post. A generation of alphabet people advocates hopes the clock isn't ticking backward. Vic Bazile remembers the time a reporter asked him, as the first executive director of the Human Rights Campaign, he would push for same-sex marriage to be legalized. Oh no, we're not interested, he remembers telling the journalist back in the mid-1980s. Yeah, it turns out they were interested, very much interested. But they decided that this seemed too insane. It seemed too insane. But then, he mentions Ellen DeGeneres. Yeah. How about AIDS? I would say that AIDS was far more significant than Ellen DeGeneres. Oh, apparently books featuring alphabet people characters have been banned from libraries. Well, some of them have been banned from children's libraries. And there's a good reason for that. Those who oppose such bills as the falsely characterized Don't Say Gay bill have found themselves being characterized as being in favor of grooming children, a term associated with child sexual predators. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It's frightening, Bazile said on a recent afternoon from the couch of his Chevy Chase apartment, and he's not the only longtime alphabet people activist watching with alarm. Devastating is the word used by Hillary Rosen, the first lobbyist Bazile hired at the Human Rights Campaign. Hillary Rosen was at one point in charge of the RIAA, and she almost single-handedly, by promoting a campaign, a legal campaign, a lawfare campaign of, oh, yes, some single mother is informed that her 13-year-old daughter has been downloading songs on Napster. Oh, and we're going to sue you for tens of thousands of dollars. Hillary Rosen almost single-handedly destroyed support for the anti-piracy campaign of the RIAA. Good work, Hillary. Scary, says Imani Woody, a longtime activist for Black and elder gay rights. I looked this woman up. That's Dr. Imani Woody to you. What is it? This woman seems to be paid by government and various organizations to do what? She's been a 3-term appointee to the DC Office of Alphabet People Affairs and was appointed by Mayor Bowser to serve on the Global Age-Friendly Task Force. She was the first program officer for the 50-plus Ministry of Metropolitan Community Churches and is the president of the Greater Brooklyn Intergenerational Village. She has a PhD in public service leadership. It's a bogus degree that is not academic study, public service leadership. But they give away an awful lot of these phony PhDs now. Terrifying, says Vivian Shapiro, a veteran activist. It gives me despair, says Elizabeth Birch, who served as the executive director of the Human Rights Campaign from 1995 to 2004. Bazile, who grew up Catholic and spent 10 years married to a woman in the late 1970s, was working at a federal agency, then known as Action. It's funny because homosexual pressure groups and government agencies, government bodies are like this. Did you ever notice when you started seeing these so touching stories about the first homosexual marriages in North America, that almost without exception, one or both of the people being married was a civil servant of some sort? You ever notice that? Okay, here we go. And unity again. Soon there was a more pressing priority, AIDS. One of Bazile's biggest professional victories came in 1986 after evidence emerged that the drug AZT was showing promise as an AIDS treatment. Despite that good news, there was no money to distribute the drug. no money. Burroughs Wellcome was getting $8,000 per patient per year. And this was for a drug which had been developed, 15 years earlier? Oh. So Bazile Rosen and one other associate secured an 11th hour meeting with Lowell Weicker, a senator from Connecticut who was the chair of the subcommittee responsible for funding. I don't know what I can do, Bazile remembers Weicker saying, but the next day, the senator spoke of their meeting on the Senate floor and requested $47 million to be included in the budget to distribute AZT. The money was approved. This was still emotional for me, Bazile says, choking back tears beneath his black frame glasses. It was the first big victory. Yes, well, I suppose if genocide counts as a victory, yeah, it was a big victory. I suppose after all these years, Bazile and Hillary Rosen are not going to. They're not going to admit what a disaster, an absolute disaster, AZT was. Of course, one of the other reasons that I feel so strongly about this is because let's take a scientific experiment that went disastrously wrong and then have all the scientists say, yay, we did such a good job. Oh, so you can just lie about anything and get away with it now. You can lie about killing hundreds of thousands of people. Golly, let's go back to the chat. Okay, here we go. I like the theme of Mishima's about art meeting reality, says Oscar Toe. His final act is like Don Quixote in a way. Reasonable and responsible, a new name to me. Welcome aboard. Would love to hear KMG debate. Look forward on COVID vaccines, etc. I just look forward to panicked reaction to this and his embrace of Australia's tyranny. Someone like that, too far gone to debate. Jay Blutarski says maybe after Fauci visited the bathhouses, it ingrained in him a desire to kill off all of the planet. Metal Mike says Pete Townsend did research on child pornography too, but watching hundreds of pornographic movies involving children, that just I can't hear Tommy anymore. For instance, I'm allergic to that now after learning about Pete Townsend. Just okay, I'm not going to repeat this about Obama. Oh dear, I'm not going to repeat that either. Yes, amyl nitrates, poppers, so beloved of Michelle Faghag Rempel Garner. Oh, why can't the gays have their poppers? Okay. Let's see. We got a lot of comments in the chat today. I'd like to get to all of you. Yo Mama says, Hellraiser is nothing on real life. Chokokin 666 says, KMG, remember Larry Kramer analog in homeless advocacy during the Reagan era. Oh, yeah, to go back to monkeypox and AIDS for a minute. It was something that I should have mentioned earlier. That is, it's different. This time it's different. This time it's different. Okay. And Alex Berenson actually quotes the famous or infamous article from the Onion, which is 21 years old now. Gay Pride Parade sets mainstream acceptance of gays back 50 years. Added bonus, the same epidemiologists who wanted to lock you and your kids up for the last 2 years for COVID, a disease that poses approximately no risk to them, are now sure to let you know that mandates and government efforts to change behavior never work. This is from Greg Gonsalves. The answer isn't shut down all these parties, tell gay men to stop having sex at them or dancing in close proximity to each other. It won't work. It hasn't worked for HIV or other kinds of infectious disease outbreaks among gay men. And this Gonsalves fellow has just been ruthlessly ratioed on Twitter. Apparently, he's some sort of expert. Let's see. Jenin Yunes writes, Greg Gonsalves's recent threat on monkeypox is quite possibly the greatest exercise in hypocrisy I have ever seen. Oh, so we know what to do, but there are always people ready to use disease to stigmatize and scapegoat. Call it out if you see it. Hughes Honor responded, raise your hand if you have seen Greg Gonsalves stigmatize and scapegoat on this website. Remember when Greg Gonsalves wrote to Francis Collins to thank him for attacking the Great Barrington Declaration? Oh, here come the homophobes, says Greg Gonsalves. Maybe we could amplify, as the kids like to say, the California figures on the proportionality of gonorrhea and syphilis. It almost seems like they're working really hard to get them. Seems that way sometimes. Of course, I'm not going to get into bug chasing. There is so much about this AIDS and male homosexual behavior, which is just so gross and fantastic that I'm going to draw a line under it right here. This is Laura Perrins at the conservativewoman.co.uk. As much disdain as I have for Boris Johnson and the Tory party inflicting this cost of lockdown crisis upon us, the only people I hold with equal responsibility are the mainstream media outlets and the Labour Party, who demanded tougher, longer, and harder lockdowns. Now they have the brass neck to try to make political hay out of this economic Armageddon. I've already called out the hypocrisy of ITV's breakfast show, Good Morning Britain, so I won't repeat myself, but it seems Kay Burley and Sky News are following suit. Lockdown breaking Kay took herself off to Wigan Pier to find out about all the poverty that was caused in part by media outlets such as Sky News, finally fully whipping up the lockdown hysteria. I don't know if you remember Sky News, dear reader, but I do, and they were almost as bad as GMB for the everyone is going to die, we must destroy the economy and lock down now propaganda. To add insult to injury, the lockdowns didn't even work. And I like the headline of this, just shut up, you lockdown lick spittles. And I should get back to the chat. I think there was some that people I left out there. Okay. Who else do we have? The fact that an insane man will be the new Pinhead in the Hellraiser remake is perfect casting, says Yo Mama. Paul Schrader is a trendy director now with young people and deserves to be, says Oscar Toe. Okay. Brandon Smith says, Holiday Monday stream. As I say, things are afoot. Enron says, since Kubrick was mentioned, and that he often liked big, I won't use the word H performances as a director, his Nicholson's Napoleon may very well have been not overly restrained. He did like big performances, not all the time, but it's funny that he's often accused of being, cold and antiseptic. And have you watched his films? Did you see the end of Paths of Glory? Did you see the end of Barry Lyndon? Did you see the end of The Killing? I could go on. Did you see the end of Lolita? There's some people out there that confuse cold and antiseptic with hysterical. Pro-commenter man quotes Dr. J.H. Bell, we believe that a widespread operation of eugenical sterilization or institutional control will greatly reduce the number of defective and dependent people within our population. Hello to No Sleep Till Breezewood, Pennsylvania. Dawn, hello to Dawn from Beyond. And how does grooming kids help us sell more insurance? Insurance? A respectable commenting name asks. So now we're openly threatening China, says Chogakin 666. Well, they used to, when Jimmy Carter was president, they used to speak of something called the bonkers factor. This was, metaphorical. But I suppose with Joe Biden, when Joe Biden seems to be looking forward to a war with China, that the White House, the State Department can just, contact the Chinese and say, look, don't listen to him. I love Jack, but I have my doubts about it too, says Anne Run. Yeah, I don't know. Jack Nicholson, that was a Napoleon. That was a little early in the day. It would have been a little early in the day for Kubrick, I think. Honestly, I hope the real Napoleon acted like the Bill and Ted one. What was it? Wiggy Piggy? It doesn't mean the books are banned as the entire problem with the GOP. Of course, it's not banned, even though it's been ruled as obscene, which is still the only material we can remove. It says respectable commenting name. My neighbor Ron Rice, founder of Hawaiian Tropic, died a few days ago at age 81. He was a good friend of Donald Trump. Billionaire Ron Rice has no wiki page. This is from God's Squad. Another new name for me, Reasonable and Responsible, says, remember David Dinkins characterizing New York City as a glorious mosaic. Joe Clark, who was remarkably enough once Prime Minister of Canada, used to rabbit on about Canada's mosaic. And I just thought, look, mosaic refers to the Jewish religion and a style of art. Just stop using it for anything else. Just stop. 2 meanings is enough. Susanna Berlinski says, what's the safest way to end a pregnancy? Birth. Well, I know the anti-abortionists will come running at you, the pro-abortionists with lots of statistics on this. And do we have anybody new here? Okay. I remember the KMG with the feminists, says David Deneau. She seemed like a nice young woman. Speaking of rad femmes, will Kevin do the scum manifesto for the book club? That was Valerie Solanas, who shot Andy Warhol almost to death. She was a lesbian prostitute and a bit of a hothead. No, I'm not really interested in reviewing books by lunatics. What the hell is a troon? Well, it's a variation on a word that you're not allowed to use on YouTube and elsewhere. Okay. Oh, hello to Quachalongo. I kind of agree, though Mishima is very Western despite his ideology, says Oscar Toe. For instance, his house. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not being Japanese. Difficult to say, but certainly his coming to believe that Japan was a corrupt country, a corrupt, doomed country, because it had sidelined the emperor for American mercantilism. Seems pretty Japanese view to me. Going to System Analyst, who wishes everyone a glorious Victoria Day and God save the Queen. Susanna Berlinski says COVID-57 will require vaccines that are 3 times stronger than those made for COVID-19. Again, good one. The end, last line of The Killing. What's the point? Sterling Hayden, as the cops are coming for him. That is so sad. So the pie fight in Dr. Strangelove wasn't used. No. I'm fairly certain the real Napoleon repeated Ziggy Piggy while watching battles unfold. Okay. The end is nigh. Joe Clark has been invoked. The original Mr. Mittens as systems analyst. Susanna Berlinski says, Maya Angelou supported Black genocide in 2010 with one speech. Maya Angelou praised Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood and raised $300,000 for their chapter in San Antonio. So, yeah, I'm done with that. Let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about baseball. Did you watch any ball games over the weekend? They were all wearing camo baseball caps, and the catchers had camo on their pads. And I thought, what? Wait a minute. Memorial Day isn't for another week. It's next Monday. Well, it was Armed Forces Day, and of course, yes, let's salute the armed forces. Baseball players are not warriors, and camouflage looks hideous. Anyway, this isn't in Southeast Asia or Africa or whatever. These games are played in North America. I just think it is completely inappropriate. One of the reasons why people like baseball and other sports, it is a respite from things like war. But a former Toronto Blue Jay, he's been suspended for one day and fined an undisclosed amount. This is from ESPN. Major League Baseball has suspended New York Yankees third baseman Josh Donaldson for one game for inappropriate comments made to Chicago White Sox shortstop Tim Anderson Saturday. He says that he is going to appeal the suspension, but shortly before the suspension was announced, the Yankees said Donaldson had been put on the COVID-19 injured list. White Sox pitching coach Ethan Katz says didn't think the penalty was enough. Okay, you want to know what this is about? Okay, there was a bench clearing brawl in a game between the Yankees and the White Sox, and part of it was that Josh Donaldson, who's a bit of a hothead, we all know this, he referred to a black player on the White Sox as Jackie. There's a reason for this. Robert Spencer writes in PJ Media, a disquieting sign of the persistence of racism in American culture today? Nope. The incident was actually a disquieting sign of how our racism-obsessed culture has given all too many people a hair-trigger sensitivity that sees racism everywhere and manufactures it when it isn't present. So what happened? Did Donaldson use the dreaded word that shuts down all discourse and rational thought and excludes one from polite society forever after? Of course not. Did he come out to bat wearing blackface? Did he taunt Anderson with an old racial stereotype about blacks? No. All he did was pass by Anderson in the first inning and say, "What's up, Jackie?" Yeah, really, that's all. Donaldson was needling Anderson over 2019 Sports Illustrated interview in which Anderson said he felt as if he were today's Jackie Robinson and was getting to the point where I need to change the game. What Anderson meant is unclear, as there are no bars to black people playing Major League Baseball today, and contrary to accusations of racism, baseball teams have actually been aggressively courting young black men to play the game so as to offset those very charges of racism. You know why there's charges of racism against Major League Baseball? Because black Americans no longer want to watch or play baseball. There are exceptions. Most of the blacks in Major League Baseball come from the Caribbean or from Central or South America. There was an infamous Toronto Star sports section headline, what was it, 15 years ago or whatever? The White Jays. Oh my God, there's no black players except for their biggest star, Carlos Delgado, and their two other biggest stars. But since they're Caribbean, they don't count as black, apparently. Now, let's see. Spencer goes on to talk about how much money Tim Anderson makes, and I don't know. They don't edit these pieces anymore. Spencer writes, Tim Anderson made over $7 million in 2021 and stands to make $9.5 million this year. In 2019, when he likened himself to Jackie Robinson, he made only a paltry $1.4 million. Where on earth would Robert Spencer, who obviously doesn't follow baseball very closely, has never heard of, say, Curt Flood, $1.4 million? Jackie Robinson retired in the 1950s. Jackie Robinson made about $300,000. That was in contemporary dollars in his entire career. Now, he made his highest salary in 1952 with the Brooklyn Dodgers when He made $42,000. Now that would be the equivalent of, I don't know, $700,000-800,000 today. But isn't that close to the minimum salary for Major League Baseball players now? No. Here's the thing. Anybody who loves baseball would just be infuriated by what this Tim Anderson fellow said. Josh Donaldson plays third base. It was as if when he started in baseball with the Oakland A's, he said he was going to be the next Brooks Robinson. Jackie Robinson and Brooks Robinson, one black, one white, are both in the Hall of Fame. You don't not start off in baseball and compare yourself to the greats because you haven't proven anything yet. Jackie Robinson had rather a short career. He played for only 10 years in the majors. He managed to accumulate 63.8 WAR. That is very, very impressive. Let's see, Brooks Robinson. Now he played for 23 seasons. His WAR was 78.5. You're going to get more WAR the longer you play, assuming you're good. But no, you just don't. Baseball is a game that respects its past, and this Tim Anderson fellow does not respect it. So, as mentioned previously, it was Victoria Day, Victoria, and I went out on the sidewalk and I saw these people camping out on the sidewalk, and I thought, oh, is it here? Is the revolution here? And then I figured out, it was Victoria Day, and they had marching bands and parade and such like. I took a look at the people on the street. Now, there's always people on Douglas Street, but these were people who had come to Douglas Street to watch the parade. There hasn't been one in 3 years because of COVID-19. And so, this is it's a public holiday in British Columbia today. So, these are people who like parades. A lot of them brought their children. And it was somewhat distressing because overwhelmingly, the people that I saw on the street, men and women, young and old, they look like the shattered remnants of a defeated army. Does no one take any pride in their appearance anymore? A couple of years ago, I did a review for the book club for Stefan Zweig's The World of Yesterday, which was written, I think, in 1943. And he goes into great detail about how formal clothing was for women under the old regime, and particularly before the First World War. And he mocks this and, how much better we're off now. But, these things don't exist. There's no stasis in human life. It'd be interesting to ask Stefan Zweig, what he thought of crop tops and yoga pants. And, yes, they had a concert in front of City Hall in the park there, which is normally a place you do not want to go to. And there was some Bhangra playing. Do you know what Bhangra is? It's a fusion of South Asian music and hip hop. So Victoria Day, of course, is not named after the city of Victoria. It is named after Queen Victoria, for which the city of Victoria is named. And kind of daring to hold a Victoria Day parade, given that Queen Victoria is a byword for the dreaded colonialism. Here's a piece in the Victoria Times Colonist by Adam Olson, who has some unpronounceable name in a fake language with a 7 with a stroke through it in it. Act of reconciliation? No, it's just political cover. He is the Green MLA for Saanich North and the Islands and a member of the Tsartlip First Nation. Few British Columbians have responded positively to Premier John Horgan's $800 million new home for the Royal BC Museum. It's a difficult time to accept it as a good way to spend tax dollars as our universal public health care system crumbles. Or maybe we should just pull down all the museums and all the amenities and spend 100% of the budget on healthcare. But that's not how we're supposed to feel about museums. Many of us, including me, have fond memories of visiting the RBCM and other museums across the province with school trips with parents or grandparents to engage the snapshots of our past. The announcement was proposed as an act of reconciliation. Is it? Or is it the status quo masquerading as reconciliation? A decade ago, I traveled to the Chicago Field Museum with my mother and sister to visit woven items from the Pacific Northwest displayed at the 1893 Chicago World Fair. This trip changed my perspective on museums. Okay, so apparently they were not given pride of place, and he was upset about this. This is crude stuff, incredibly crude stuff. Fishing net, cod lure, etc. Yes, hidden away in a basement. So he says that Horgan's announcement about the Royal BC Museum brought me to tears multiple times. Is it? Is that true? Because if it is true, you're too sensitive to live. It had a sadness deep inside me activated by the announcement of his legacy monument. It's a subtle, powerful act of aggression to assert dominance. Okay, you know what? How about we just take all of these trinkets and the like and hand them back to the Indian tribes? Okay? Because then how long they would manage to keep them after they were given them, how long any building that they built to house them would survive without, falling into desuetude or simply collapsing would be an interesting question. Yes, it's just never enough. Apparently we need a new Royal BC Museum because the old one was not sufficiently, groveling to Native Indians. Oh, yes. The politicians of tomorrow. You want to learn what the politicians of tomorrow are going to be like? Well, there is a piece in the Aurelia Sun. Aurelia is a town in Ontario. It's part of Sun Online Media. Crystal Brooks, not a politician, and Crystal, of course, is spelt with a K and a Y. This is a story by John Swartz. Crystal Brooks is taking her first plunge into the political swamp. Is that really the sentence that you want? She's the Green Party's candidate in Simcoe North. And she is 28 years old, has 2 children, and her nephew lives with her. Until recently, I never actually lived on the reserve. She's not sure of her lineage. I know as far as my grandmother, my grandfather, I have no idea. She didn't finish high school and is unemployed. Okay. How does she survive then? You can't work while you're running for office. What I want to do is go to school, and I want to go through a social services program. My dream job would be working in some kind of victim services field. Okay. She claims to have been sexually trafficked by a member of the Ontario Provincial Police. I am not sure that I believe her, particularly since she's rather economical with the actuality when it comes to what's happening with this case. Has it been investigated? Is it being investigated? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But let's hear more of the wit and wisdom of Crystal with a K Brooks. Okay. Change, quote, this direct quote. Changes with the justice system. At this point, I wouldn't even call it a justice system. It's a judicial system. Well, actually, and in many ways, very ineffective. RAMA, we have our own police system, which is very false. The higher-ups are RCMP. They're governed by RCMP. They work in partnership with the OPP. It's relevant for me, but it may be irrelevant for the topic. For me, this is an issue of Indigenous self-governance and lack of through the policing system we have. It's very much like any police force, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things she thinks police officers lack, which happens to strike at the heart of many of the headline issues, is they don't receive adequate training about the jobs we expect them to know and do, and especially on the topic of race. One of the things people have noticed from media reports of late is how police respond to similar situations where race is a factor. Again, personal experience illustrates a viewpoint. On Canada Day, many people passed flying the maple leaf in favor of something reflective of the residential school system. Some actually used the occasion to make a political statement of a different kind, according to Brooks. Quote, actually, on Canada Day, the Canadian flag was used as a weapon toward Indigenous people. It was very odd. Many of the houses that hung Canadian flags, there were a few I know personally that never hung in their entire lives, and they've been very racist towards me. The thought of taking that time or that day, which doesn't mean you can't be proud to be Canadian, they were very vocal about not taking the time to reflect on that day. Okay, so the flag of Canada itself, which is a generic flag, one of the worst in the world. Apparently, this is now offensive to Indians. I don't know. How about we just give them the Yukon, all of it? They can just all move to the Yukon, and then that will be their territory. Because they had nothing to do with Canada. Canada is a European foundation. Everything that we understand to be Canada was made by Europeans. Native Indians had nothing whatsoever to do with it. All they ever did was to benefit thereby. And if it hadn't been decisions of John A. Macdonald and others to carve out Indian reserves and to institute residential schooling, the Indians in Canada would have disappeared. They would have completely disappeared. They would have died off or just simply intermarried with the whites, such that we would not be able to speak of Indian communities in Canada. And in fact, John A. Macdonald, he said that was one of the reasons why he created the reserve system to protect Indian culture. Now, okay. Can you imagine if you were from the heart of Africa, the dark heart of Africa, and a country like Canada let you in? What would your reaction be? Would your reaction be gratitude? No, you are naive, Kay. This is from Chelsea Nash at the Hill Times. Time to stop pussyfooting around racism. When do we draw the line? Asked Black Liberal MPs. In the wake of the mass shooting on May 14th in Buffalo, New York, which targeted Black people, the current and former chair of the Liberal Black Caucus say they want to see concrete action from their own government to address racism and hate in Canada. I can't speak for the government, but I could speak as a member of Parliament that clearly I would like to have very strong anti-hate legislation put in place, Liberal MP Greg Fergus told the Hill Times. But we can have the strongest type of legislation. The point is we need to change hearts and minds, and we can't pussyfoot this with anymore. We need to change hearts and minds by telling people we will put them in prison if they don't grovel to minorities. Where do we draw the line? When is enough enough? Liberal MP Ariel Kayabaga said in an interview with the Hill Times. When do we actually go from talking about it to actually taking action? Does this Liberal MP or do any of these Liberal MPs, do they actually know that Canada is not the same country as the United States? I'm only half joking here when I say that sometimes I think that they don't know. Kayabaga, who came to Canada at age 11 as a refugee from Burundi, said, I love Canada. I came to this country to flee from a war-torn country, and I'm very, very proud and happy to be on this land. However, we have a lot of work to do. What you mean we, Kimo Sabi? And when we hear people say it's better in Canada than the USA, that doesn't make me feel safe. Well, why don't you just piss off back to Burundi? I'm sure you'd be plenty safe there. After the attack, in which 11 of the 13 people shot were Black, former Liberal Cabinet Minister Catherine McKenna was criticized for tweeting, quote, reading the news today, I'm feeling very fortunate to live in Canada, a diverse and tolerant country that values freedom while respecting human rights. We aren't perfect, and building our country is an ongoing project, but I wouldn't choose anywhere else, unquote. Barbara Perry, the director of the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism at Ontario Tech University, told the Hill Times that responses like McKenna's are typical of Canadian complacency. It shows how little political leaders understand the nature of the far-right movement in the Canadian context. Again, Barbara Perry doesn't seem to understand that Canada is not the United States. That apparently, see, Catherine McKenna didn't say Canada's racist, always been racist, systemic racism, white supremacy, oh, the pain, the pain. She didn't say that. And so she must be demonized. So, okay. Oh, yeah. And here is a pressing Angeline Francis is an equity and inequality reporter at the Toronto Star. A freelance photographer, video producer, writer, and host, Angeline has covered various topics, sometimes all at once. She previously hosted season 1 of HuffPost's award-winning podcast, Born and Raised, which was about second-generation Canadians and how food influences their lives. Food. Yeah. Children. All of them children. And she, Angeline Francis, wrote a story with Simran Singh, and I'm not making this up. Black people deal with hair discrimination everywhere. Will Canada take a cue from the US's Crown Act and end it? A 13-year-old Toronto District School Board student was told her hair was too poofy by her principal in 2015. Wow, this outrage is 7 years old. A retail employee working at Zara quit after managers asked her to take out her box braids for a more professional look in 2016. Yes, this outrage is 6 years old. A restaurant host at the AGO was told by a manager her hair would scare the customers in 2019. Yes, this outrage is 3 years old. These are just a few cases of hair discrimination Black people in Ontario have faced in the last decade. And so far, there still aren't rules or laws in place to stop it. Meanwhile, in the US, at least 8 states have made hair-based race discrimination illegal, and a national bill on the matter, the Crown, Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act, passed in the House in March and is awaiting Senate approval. Natural hair? These braids, which are so common among Black women, is that natural hair? No, it is not. The burst pillow hairstyle, yeah, that's typically natural, but sometimes it isn't. But no, they had to, you start with the name and then you try to create the acronym. In Canada, the U.S., issues of hair discrimination have persisted, particularly in the workplace and in schools where dress codes and rules don't consistently account for different textures and styles that Black and Indigenous people may wear. There have been instances where First Nations students have had their hair cut against their will by classmates and teaching staff. What a terrible, terrible country this is. I just don't know how the BIPOC people, why that they just don't roll over and just die of exhaustion. It just, the torture never stops. And oh, wait a minute, I mentioned Victoria. Now this is interesting. I don't know how this slipped through the radar. This is from Jake Rumpf at Victoria News. The Greater Victoria School District sent out a letter last week telling international students they can't go to areas in and around downtown Vancouver on weekend nights. The SD61 letter sent by International Education Homestay Manager Shandy Clegg said students in its Victoria International Education Program will be restricted from downtown James Bay and Beacon Hill Park. There seems to have been an escalation in negative group behavior, and with the safety of our students and the community as our first priority, we will not be allowing students in the downtown core after 5 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays until further notice. While police have identified about 150 people ranging in age from 14 to 24 who have been consistently coming downtown on recent weekends, well, that's ridiculous. Police have identified about 150 people who have been consistently coming downtown. What they mean is who have been causing trouble. Well, SD61 claimed a number of international students are among those in the larger group identified by police. The district did not say whether its downtown weekend ban affected all of its international students. The chief of police, Delmanic of Victoria, emphasized that while a small group is connected to the reported swarming incidents and vandalism, the majority of the youth are responsible. What the majority of the youth? This is terrible writing. So now, Victoria, now home of swarming incidents downtown. Golly, just like in Chicago. And hang on a second. Somebody or some people are smoking marijuana on an adjacent balcony, and that I cannot abide. This is from Evan Dyer at the CBC. Russia's dreaded cyber warriors seem to be struggling in Ukraine. Ha ha, Russia, ha ha. Russia's hackers, like its military, may not be quite as fearsome as the world thought. Take that, Ruskies. The planted axiom here is that somehow that Russia is more of a threat to us than we are to Russia. Oh, yes, the Canadian infrastructure, Canadian ecosystem. Yes, when Russia is, looking for targets, they always think first of Canada because the whole world always thinks first of Canada. Russian hackers even failed to disrupt voting in the European Song Contest. Ukraine won, and it was totally legit, not at all fixed. Yeah, take that, Ruskies. Ukraine is now the gayest country on earth. Didn't see that coming, did you? And then there's a whole bunch of claims, almost certainly fake, about Russian attacks, cyber attacks on the Ukraine. I think I'll save Frank Wright's essay on the Ukraine until tomorrow. Oh, yes. You want to know what the View thinks about Nancy Pelosi being banned from the altar? Pam Key at Breitbart, Joy Behar said on the View that the Archbishop of San Francisco is wrong. Pro-Francis is not pro-choice, but he is also against capital punishment. Oh, and the governor of Texas has signed, death warrants. Well, Francis can say what he likes about the death penalty. There is nothing in Catholic tradition, Catholic, history, all the rest of it, that is against the death penalty. Nothing whatsoever. People who are executed are guilty of crimes. Children who are aborted are guilty of nothing other than being inconvenient. Whoopi Goldberg, the Archbishop, barring Pelosi from communion. How dare you? What's it to her? She knows that the Catholic Church is a private institution. Doesn't she? She continued, what is the saying? It's kind of amazing, but what is the point of communion, right? It's for sinners. No, it's not. It's for people that are in a state of grace. And they're talking about a church and state issue. Again, there's no state religion in the United States, although the 13 colonies, most of them had state religions. And the Catholic Church is a private organization. No one is forcing Nancy Pelosi to remain a member of the Catholic Church. When Pierre Trudeau died, he got one of the biggest Catholic funerals in Canadian history. My word, you think that it had been, Pope Pius XII had died. And let's see. Oh, this is good. Peter Hitchens at Mail Plus, the Mail Plus. Why England should leave the UK and declare an English secession. Here. I've been saying this for years. I really hope this becomes a movement. What are we waiting for? All the other nations of the UK are set on tearing themselves away from England. I've given up trying to persuade them to stay. Let them leave instead. Have a referendum if you must, but I reckon that any party that puts an English secession from the UK in its general election manifesto will win a smashing majority. You could not call this independence, since England has never depended on the other countries in these islands. I would call it the restoration of England in a recollection of that other great moment in our history when Oliver Cromwell's nightmare Republican junta crumbled in 1660 and we returned with relief to our ancient laws and liberties. From a chosen day, England would once again be a sovereign nation in its own right, instead of the country that lives in millions of hearts but is barely mentioned in official documents and is associated mainly in the minds of the world with football and cricket teams. It would be surprisingly easy since so much of our government and law is already English borrowed by others from us. No more will we have to speak of our country abroad as the UK, a weary set of initials that denies 1,000 years of illustrious history and reduces them to a bureaucratic nothingness. We have the laws of England, our great founding documents, the Great Charter, or Magna Carta, as others call it, and the Bill of Rights are English. We have the literature of England, a possession beyond price. Did you ever hear anyone speak of British literature? We have a Queen of England. We have the Church of England. Many of our government ministries nowadays only operate in England. The breakup of the BBC and the creating of a new English broadcasting corporation would be a superb opportunity for desperately needed reform. In fact, this would be part of the point. We have no need to set up an English parliament in some shed in Milton Keynes, designed by one of those Blairite architects, all poles, points, and projections, with funny wooden bits glued on to relieve the boredom. The Parliament at Westminster is English already since the days of Simon de Montfort and has simply given hospitality to others during the long adventure of the Union. By becoming wholly English again, it could recover much of its force and its purpose. Personally, I think the great years of our global power are thrilling and inspiring, and agree with the conclusion of the Spanish-American philosopher George Santayana on Britain's imperial past that, quote, never since the days of heroic Greece has the world had such a sweet, just, boyish master. It will be a black day for the human race when scientific blackguards, churls, and fanatics manage to supplant him, unquote. Hitchens argues no doubt many wicked things were done by our empire, but compare it with the Soviet, Belgian, Spanish, and Portuguese empires of the past, or with the hideous Chinese empire of the future. And you might then concede that if there must be empires, and it looks very much as if this is so, ours was better by far than any that has ever existed. He quotes Tennyson, though we are not now the strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Look around Europe and see those nations that are happiest. They are the small, compact ones which concentrate on their own business and contentment rather than stomping about the world pretending to be great powers when they long ago ceased to be so. They join alliances when it suits them to do so. They rejoice in what they have, and we have much more than they do. Personally, I've long found the words English and England secretly thrilling. One of my favorite moments in our history is the first Queen Elizabeth's speech at Tilbury before the Armada, in which she proclaimed that she had the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too. Hitchens continues, people say there is something racist about Englishness. Well, I am all sorts of mongrel myself, who was not even born here, but in the middle of the Mediterranean. And I do not think myself 1 ounce less English as a result. I think this is slightly misleading. Yes, he was born in Malta because his father was a British naval officer. Call me a little Englander if you want, he says. The great marvel of this country was always that it was so small, yet came to dominate the whole world for a few astonishing decades. I would rather be jeered at for admitting our real size and our true limits than be like the frog in the fable, which tried to puff itself up to be bigger than the mighty ox, and so exploded into fragments. And yes, Scotland is constantly moaning about leaving, and the Northern Irish are constantly complaining about a Brexit. And of course, Scotland and Northern Ireland are entirely dependent on money sent to them by the English, the Northern Irish, astonishingly so. Yes, England should secede As to Wales, well, that's an interesting case because Wales has been joined to England at the hip for what, close to a millennium. I should think that if there were any, if there's still sanity in Wales, they would like to remain. But if they don't, well, good luck to them. The Scottish, to a very large extent, to a lesser extent, the Welsh, seem to think that they're contributing anything, except pique, really, and resentment. Oh, that England, what would England do without us? Thrive, actually, well, certainly to a much greater extent than it does now. This is from Alan Bakari at Breitbart. Research shared exclusively with Breitbart identifies hundreds of millions of dollars flowing from Bill Gates' foundation to 11 of the 26 organizations that signed an open letter last month urging Twitter advertisers to boycott the company if Elon Musk restores free speech on the platform. It's based on research and analysis from the newly formed Foundation for Freedom Online, analyzed public filings to trace hundreds of millions of dollars in contributions from the letter signatories back to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In total, 11 of the 26 anti-Musk organizations received funding from a Gates-backed entity. And of course, George Soros is in there. And the Tides Foundation, which wields a pretty big stake in Canadian politics, despite not being a Canadian organization, funds 5 of the signatories: Free Press, Indivisible, NARAL, Pro-Choice America, Media Matters, and the Black Lives Matter Global Network. And of course, there is a sexual charge made against Elon Musk, which just happened to come out, last week. Given that Elon Musk has been the richest man in history and the richest man in the world for quite some time now, you would think that, a shakedown operation would have happened quite some time ago. No. It's very coincidental, wouldn't you say? Joseph Curl reports at the Daily Wire, Elon Musk, embroiled in his own scandal that has been dubbed Elongate, jumped into the Russiagate story that has now found its way into a federal courtroom. Over the weekend, Musk called out as a hoax a tweet that two-time loser Hillary Clinton posted shortly before the 2016 presidential election. Clinton wrote in a tweet on October 31st, 2016, computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covered server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-based bank. And the tweet included a lengthy note from one of her then top aides, Jake Sullivan, who now serves as President Joe Biden's national security advisor. Sullivan wrote, this could be the most direct link yet between Donald Trump and Moscow. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covered server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-based bank. The secret hotline may be the key to unlocking the mystery of Trump's ties to Russia. It certainly seems the Trump organization felt it had something to hide, given that it apparently took steps to conceal the link when it was discovered by journalists. This is what they call projection. Hillary Clinton did have a secret server in her home, which was illegal, and a threat to national security. And it was kept secret. Oh, and then all these emails of over 30,000 of them. Oh, yes, I took 30,000 personal emails out. I've talked about this before, but it's important, so I got to mention it again. If you have ever had the occasion to have to delete, because you're running out of space on your account, emails, and then, okay, I'll just keep the ones that are important. It takes forever. And your mind becomes cloudy very, very quickly. You can do Boolean searches for things. I mean, you could search for, say, Chelsea, the name of her child. Of course, Chelsea refers to other things as well. Someone named Roman Abramovich, who owns the Chelsea soccer team. He is something of a geopolitical figure. So if you were to give one example, eliminate all messages that have the name Chelsea in them, you might find yourself eliminating actual, State Department tweets. A user on Twitter asked Elon Musk Friday evening if he planned to crack down on disinformation if his deal to purchase Twitter is finalized. I would be interested to know if, when you receive control over the company, anything was done with this at any level. Please advise soonest, the user wrote. You are absolutely correct, Musk replied. That tweet is a Clinton campaign hoax for which their campaign lawyer is undergoing a criminal trial, linking to a story from the BBC story about the ongoing trial of Michael Sussman, who served as an attorney for the Clinton campaign in 2016. Of course, Robbie Mook, who breaks my two-name rule, he was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager in 2016. My two-name rule is if you have a name, say, you can have one unusual name, but not two. Mook, it seems something to laugh at, really, But then Robert Mook. Okay, fine. Robbie Mook? What is he, some punk gangster in a movie? Anyway, he turned on Hillary in his testimony during the trial. And of course, there was a meme created immediately. Hi, I'm Robbie Mook. If I'm found dead, it wasn't natural. And a long story from Revolver News. Busted disinformation operative who attacked Elon Musk's push for free speech got caught red-handed in secret influence operation. And this person's name is Renee DiResta. And she is an disinformation and misinformation expert. Again, as I like to say, what is the nature of these people's expertise? Is this something that can be qualified or quantified? I don't think so. And it turns out that this woman was engaged in actual political disinformation. Her dark Alabama secret. She worked, among other things, as a research director for a cybersecurity firm called New Knowledge. And there is one very important secret of malign influence operation that Renee DiResta failed to disclose to the Senate. This influence operation was conducted by her own employer, New Knowledge, to influence the outcome of the 2017 Alabama special Senate contest between populist Roy Moore and Doug Jones. The details of the influence operation are even more scandalous. And what even the head of New Knowledge described as a false flag operation, New Knowledge conducted a secret influence operation to make it look like populist candidate Roy Moore was the beneficiary of a secret Russian influence operation. The New York Times, of all places, broke the story of this remarkable and now forgotten scandal. Well, as I tweeted today, it is no longer too reflexive to assume that all so-called misinformation or disinformation experts are feds, either directly or by proxy. And before I move on to a consideration of Season 3, Episode 5 of Barry, Conservative Party member resigns membership over racist email. This is Richard Raycraft of the CBC. So supposedly, this person managed to, public affairs strategist Chisholm Pothier, who was working for the Brown campaign, managed to misspell Adolf Hitler's name. Good one. So the Brown campaign claimed that it received a message that said this. Now, the person who supposedly sent it is redacted. What was the mail service that sent it? Redacted. You have sent this to the wrong person. I believe in Nazism, and if Adolf Hitler had won World War II, we would not have the bullshit that all these Asians, Chinese, Koreans, Africans, Jamaicans, etc. bring to our great country. They would not exist. I support Pierre Poilievre. This is obviously fake, and I'll explain why. Well, any child would understand why. Pierre Poilievre believes in the Great Replacement. He loves it. He can't get enough of it. So, no, someone who actually supported Nazism would not support Pierre Poilievre. It's fake. And it seems entirely likely to me that this email uh, was sent by a member, official or unofficial, of Patrick Brown's campaign. Funny that we don't have the name of the Conservative Party member that was expelled. Hmm? Was this member actually even a real person? I wonder about that. Michelle Poppers, Rempel Garner, said if there's one thing we all should agree on is that there's no room for racism in the Conservative Party of Canada. Patrick Brown believes that every Tamil in the world should be invited to live in Canada. Again, I am not making this up. He has said this. He's written it. And one more before I move on to Barry. I never heard of this woman, Melanie Paradis, before. She's all over the media these days. She is described as a veteran conservative campaigner and an executive ghostwriter. Not just a ghostwriter, but an executive, a ghostwriter. Does she have a corner office? I wonder. The wave of anger that toppled Jason Kenney is a danger to all conservatives. Well, it's a danger to her and her ilk. And she makes this astonishing claim that we've been groomed for angers for the past decade. Social media algorithms, I'll have more on algorithms in just a minute, incentivize outrage. Media outlets churn out clickbait, and bad actors like Russia and China use the long arm of the internet to run elaborate thought scams on Canadians, leveraging our distrust in the media, our governments, and even each other. Russia has no influence in Canada. None. Zero. No. Nada. But yeah, let's just, I got to throw Russia in there somewhere. Do you ever hear about Russian students, making a fuss on Canadian soil? To give an example, pro-Putin versus anti-Putin, Russian students feuding, fighting, hitting each other, etc. in Canada? No, you don't. Now, Haiti. Yeah, the New York Times is trying to rehabilitate Haiti. How about that, huh? But let's go to Barry. And Crazy Time Shit Show was the name of yesterday's episode. And Michael Ironside was in it, the great Michael Ironside of Scanners fame and of Total Recall and others. He played, I did not recognize him. The credits were running. Michael Ironside? I know what Michael Ironside looks like. Everyone knows what Michael Ironside looks like. He was playing the head, the capo de tutti capa. How's that phrase go? Of the Chechen mob. And Joe Mantegna made another appearance, and it's always nice to see him. He seems like a nice man. Perhaps he's just a good actor, but he seems like a nice man. And we have all of these people chasing Barry now. All of these people. And I mentioned this before, but in a show like this, or in any of these long form dramas, one begins asking, how come all these people are still alive? And again, it would be good for this show if some name characters died, because it's pushing credulity that all these people can survive. Laura San Giacomo appeared. Haven't seen her in quite a while. And so, we have a return from the Marines. That there was a Marine friend of Barry's, Albert, whose life he had saved in Afghanistan. And Albert was shot through the face in a very harrowing scene. And Barry lost control and ran into the nearest house and committed a war crime by shooting to death an innocent man who had nothing to do with it. was a sniper on a roof who had shot Albert. Albert's now an FBI agent. I see that everyone's referring to him as a special agent. They're all called special agents. And he has been this is now a federal crime because of the supposed existence of a Chechen super assassin called the Raven. So now this has become a federal case. And it's sort of a reverse of the typical cliche where the FBI fellows show up and they're, arrogant and bumbling and they don't understand local conditions. And they're just looking for easy wins. This is the reverse of that because Albert clearly knows what he's doing. And the police chief of Los Angeles, who says, "Call me Big Cat." He really meant it. He really means it. Chief Krause, played by Gary Krause. He's a funny guy. He's appeared several times in Barry. He really wants people to call him Big Cat. Mae Dunn, who played by Sarah Burns, who is the police detective in charge of the case, she seems like a sweet woman. However, she is not very intelligent and certainly not very diligent. Of course, Barry has been officially cleared by the police. And, just doing something for a friend. That would be Mr. Cousineau. Now, I suppose this episode could be called the Gene Cousineau Apology Tour. We saw a very different Gene Cousineau than we have seen, throughout the show. And just nice as pie. Cousineau has, of course, had so very well played by Henry Winkler, has been given a second chance by Barry, actually. Barry brought this about. Barry gave him a ton of money, guilt money, I suppose. And Gene is he treated so many people in the entertainment business so badly that he apologizes, to the showrunner, who decades earlier on, the show, of course, is called Laws of Humanity, and it's based on a lawyer called Hugh Manity. No, really. So the showrunner, he had thrown hot tea in his face decades earlier on Murder, She Wrote, and he apologizes for this, and the showrunner gets a little teary-eyed. And Joe Mantegna has invited him to dinner at his lovely home. And he shows up with a bottle of no doubt expensive wine, and they're all seated at the table. And he apologizes to Joe Mantegna that they came up together, he says, and, he was so very jealous of his success that he badmouthed him throughout the business. And he's very, very sorry about that. And then he recognizes a woman at the table, Annie, again played by the aforementioned Laura San Giacomo, and he apologizes to her for being a bad boyfriend, not treating her well, and she is not buying the apology. She just isn't. Of course, that's a major theme running through Barry this year, forgiveness. How does one secure forgiveness? Are there some people that cannot be forgiven? It turns out that Gene Cousineau did more than simply be a bad boyfriend to Annie. She was a theater director, and he wrecked her career on both coasts in Los Angeles and in New York City. And now she works as an art teacher, and she's not having it. She storms off from the meal. Gene says that he didn't remember it. I suppose it's possible to have done so many bad things that one doesn't remember them all. I mean, he is an actor. I mean, he's good at pretending. But again, this raises the question of evil, really. I mean, the nature of evil. that Gene, I mean, it's very convenient for people to be able to forget bad things that they have uh, done. But of course, I don't think that, I'm sure at the time, that Gene Cousineau thought that he was doing the right thing, that this woman was a terrible director or she had done bad things herself and needed to be stopped. So meanwhile, Monroe Fuchs is still trying to put together this Phantom Panther army to bring down Barry. And we see a bunch of dirt bike trick riders coming perilously close to Monroe Fuchs out there in the desert in what is clearly not CGI and performing, I must say, rather amazing stunts. And amusingly, the sister of Von Taylor, Barry's crazy violent friend from the Marines, who got killed because he horned in on a scheme. When his sister is told about this, oh, I know the guy who did it, she's not interested. When he lies and says that Barry owed him, what was it, $1,700 or whatever for a hot tub, then she's interested. She's not interested in the honor of her dead brother, but $1,700 that she is interested. If you saw last year, you'll remember that Vaughn wanted to build a hot tub in the desert, and Monroe Fuchs was beside himself with disbelief and rage over this. Who would build a hot tub in the desert? But and what else do we learn from this show? Oh, yes. As I previously mentioned, I have known two women in my life who were married and whose husbands left them for another man. They were not forgiving. No. They wouldn't stop going on about it. This had such a terrible effect on them. The sense of betrayal, the sense of disgust. And, we learned that Cristobal Cifuentes, who is in a gay relationship with NoHo Hank, that he left behind a wife and children in Bolivia. And he had been brought into the gangster family at a high level because his wife's father, his father-in-law, was the leader of the gang. He did this as a favor to his daughter. She shows up on the scene, and she seems quite a formidable woman. One wouldn't want to cross. And she sees a picture, this love picture of NoHo Hank and Cristobal, and she breaks down into tears. Cristobal has already been seized by Bolivians. And we also had a great action scene last night. What happens when the police and gangsters show up at the same place at the same time? One, we're going to arrest all these people. Two, the other gang, we're going to kill all these people and blow up their stuff. Well, fireworks ensue. It was surprising and very enjoyable. Later, sadly, we learned that people who buy pistols should get training, and that I don't know that you can trust women to have good trigger discipline. Of course, in so many shows that you always see these people's finger on the trigger when they're just holding their gun. And no, you don't do that. Put your finger on the trigger until you're just about to shoot someone. But I wanted to talk about an aspect of the show that was brought up by Bill Hader himself. Hader, of course, is the co-creator of Barry. He's the star. He has directed many episodes. The show has just been renewed for a fourth season. It's been announced he's going to direct all of those episodes. And he has written or co-written many of the episodes of Barry. This is from Ben Travers at IndieWire. Bill Hader and Alec Berg on season 3 Seams and Why Sally Deserves Better. The co-creators of HBO's acclaimed comedy break They break down Banshee inspirations, good network notes, and a regular reaction that really bothers them. Oh, yes, Elizabeth Perkins, who was kind of a big star in the 1980s. She's appeared in 2 episodes playing the head of a streaming network called Banshee, and I really like her acting. She's imperious, but at the same time, she seems to have forgotten where she is, or she's on drugs or something. That her reactions are so lacking in affect as to make her seem insane. Now, she famously mentions one of the most famous sayings about Hollywood is by the screenwriter William Goldman, who said, "Nobody knows anything." And then there's a pause, and then she says, "Except the algorithm." You see, Sally's streaming program, which she is the creator, producer, star, and showrunner, kind of meta reference. Get it? Well, there's problems with it, big problems. And well, see, it's a question of taste clusters and verticals. Taste clusters is a real thing. Apparently, this is a Netflix idea. What about word of mouth? It's only been 12 hours. Oh, the algorithm figures out the word of mouth. Now, there's many famous examples of shows that didn't do very well in the ratings, but they had critical acclaim. Peep Show in England didn't do well for years, but it made it up with selling of DVDs, and then it became much more popular. Of course, Breaking Bad is a very famous example. That it was on the verge of cancellation, but the critics really love it, and it's building an audience, and it seems to be selling Blu-rays and DVDs, so they kept it going. But now they have algorithms. Getting back to Sally, I suppose I'm guilty of this to a certain degree myself. Let's look at Betty Draper on Mad Men. What did I think about Betty Draper? Beautiful woman, terrible, hateful mother. I don't like her. Now, of course, we're not privy in Mad Men to the early years or the earliest years of the Drapers' marriage. Now, we know that Dawn has been cheating on her pretty much right from the beginning, but she is not aware of this. She might have her suspicions, but Betty Draper had just had this uncanny ability to suck all the air out of a room. I'm unhappy, so you are all going to be unhappy. Plus, she almost aborted one of her children out of spite. And again, she was just a dreadful mother. But again, could be quite unfair to her because, again, we don't know. Maybe she wasn't always this miserable. Let's look at Skylar White on Breaking Bad. What did I think of Skylar White? Did not like her. The first episode, it's Walt's birthday, and you know what that means in the bedroom? It means her half-heartedly trying to do something, well, taking part in an eBay auction. And then later, none of the horrors that occurred in that series would have happened if Skylar had simply acceded to Walt's demands and just let him die of cancer. Probably would have been quite quick, but nope, she has to bully him into the best treatment available in the United States, which costs a fortune, which of course he does not have, and determines that, well, he's going to have to break the law, and then more and more and more. Now, of course, Skylar may have been an unpleasant woman, but on the other hand, her husband was a murderer, a mass murderer, actually. And that's one of the arguments that Bill Hader makes in this with regard to Sally. Sally is a very selfish person, very narcissistic person. We see that throughout the show that Bill Hader was doing these favors for her, all manner of favors, and she did not reciprocate, and she lorded it over all the other acting students and was often cruel to them. And we saw that, oh, that Barry was always available to help her, with her lines. And there were several times when he asked for help and she wasn't willing to give it. But I suppose what really sticks out most about Sally is how obtuse she is. That look at the whole of season 3. That Barry is in a dark place, and he's a shell of his former self. Sally is rising in the world, and she doesn't see it. She literally doesn't see it. That Barry, confesses to, oh, I'm looking for work, couldn't get it, so I just drove around all night. Oh, do you want to talk about that, dear? No, she's just not. She's not interested. Then, of course, after he yells at her in a rather frightening way with regard to her not giving Gene a part in her show, then she's interested in him. Oh, yes, and she starts calling him Boo Bear, and oh, I bought you a new controller for your, video game, and all this kind of stuff. And of course, this harkens back to what we know of her marriage, that she is drawn to men who are, well, violent. And it seems to be a turn on for her. She's not interested in a nice guy. But Barry gets some advice, I'm sure good-hearted advice, that he can't be two opposite people, and cram them into one person. Pressure cooker. So, try to be more honest. Well, given that Barry is a serial killer for hire, this was not particularly good advice. And there was just a scene which I guess goes to the heart of Barry, which is both hilarious and horrifying at the same time. Talking about the Elizabeth Perkins character. The whole point is to isolate her and make her feel like she's going insane. Replace her dog with a slightly different dog. Change the furniture in her house so she thinks she's shrinking. Basic stuff, mostly I learned in the military, some of it on a subreddit. But Bill Hader and Alec Berg point out that they're not pleased with all the Sally hatred. I mentioned before, it really is it's a thankless role because she's not a likable person. But again, Barry kills people. Now, she doesn't know this. Alec Berg says she's dating a guy who was a chronic repetitive murderer, and yet for some reason people's concerns are much more with, is he going to be happy with her? And Hader says it's weird. Berg says the level of judgment that we inflict on women who are narcissistic or just seek fame, who are just seeking that kind of career, is a conversation into itself. That definitely applies with Sally. But yeah, that's a scary note. Bill Hader says it's very strange to us that someone would say Sally is so terrible. And it's like, well, Barry kills people. I actually did have this conversation with somebody recently. I won't say who it was, but it was a journalist who said, yeah, Sally is terrible. And I said, Barry kills people. And they were like, yeah, but I know you're not actually killing people, It's a problem, but it's baked into the cake. Barry is a killer. Okay, we know that right from the very beginning. Walter White makes and sells meth. And then, he goes through some harrowing experiences trying to protect himself before deciding he has to be, the emperor of meth. It's like Vic on The Shield. Right from the very beginning, we learn that Vic is a murderer. Now, if you want to drop the show because of that, because I don't want to, watch a show which is about, Way making excuses for a murderer, It's because he gets results, stupid chief, as Homer Simpson would say. Then you've got to abandon the show. Now, I mean, I'm sure you could switch the sexes on this, right? Have a narcissistic man and a woman who wasn't, and you'd likely get the same reaction from the audience. I don't know that it can be avoided. I bet that there are an awful lot of women out there who find Sally Reed to be just an unbearable person. Once again, one has to single out Sarah Goldberg for just doing just a wonderful job with is again a thankless role. You know, actresses tend to shy away from this sort of thing because they know from years after this, people are gonna she's gonna pass someone, in an airport or something, and this woman's gonna be glaring at her. I don't know this woman. Why is she glaring at me? Because she remembered you from that show, or maybe she didn't remember. She just thinks you're a real person, and she just thought that you were unbearable. So those are my thoughts about season 3, episode 5 of Barry. Let's go back to the chat finally. Respectable commenting name says Barry is a killer and mentally unwell, but he's still more relatable than these shrill harridans. Dan says she is a Canadian as well. Indeed, she comes from Vancouver, as do I. Tarot Destroyer says the old movie studios instructed a new actor to never be seen on the town with one man. Always have an extra man, as 3 men eating dinner together or attending a play was not suspicious. Oh, yes. And of course, yesterday's episode, the denouement of it, is a callback to what Gene had said in season 2. He said there's an old saying that when you plan revenge, you'd better dig 2 graves. Don Willis is quoting Rush. Tarot Destroyer says at least 5% of the U.S. population is extraordinarily hypnotizable, so easily hypnotizable that they're in a constant state of exaggerated suggestibility even when awake. Dr. Tobias Brocker. Thanks for blessing us with Monday show, KMG. It is appreciated, says Don Willis. Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your kind words. Chief Big Cat Cheap Clapper. I like the actor who played Albert Nguyen. I mean, it's difficult to play, tough guy cop, because there's a tendency to just become hammy. He wasn't hammy. Alrighty. Is that it? Dark Alabama Secret sounds incestuous and illegal, says Don Willis. Prokofiev. Dance of the Nights. Oscar Toe likes that. Prokofiev. Well, everyone likes his Romeo and Juliet music, right? And everyone likes his First Symphony, which is a cheeky modernization of the classical form. Is Zelensky a folk rapper, says Oscar Toe? Is there nothing this man can't do? Okay, that's it for today. I'm going to be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for tuning in. It is greatly appreciated, as always. Oh, final comment from Earl Pike. Taste clusters are my fave breakfast cereal. If you would like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I leave you with this benediction: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do really wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.